Hi, and welcome to DNA for Africa's podcast series. My name is Vanessa Lynch, and today we have an amazing change advocate, activist, crusader, Mbali Shongwe, joining us. Thank you for joining us, Mbali. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization and the work that you do in activism against gender-based violence and many other things in South Africa?
Thank you so much for having me, Vanessa. My name is Mbali Shongwe and I'm 22 years old. And I am the founder of Mindful Organization, which is a youth-based mental health nonprofit. We aim to create a space where everyone can come together and exist in community and support each other through our journey. Brought forth by my experience of sexual assault in 2019. And I think after that experience, I was very lost. I was really young, and I think being just fresh in university and not really having the voice to advocate for myself in that situation, I felt that over time, there needed to be a way that I could regain my strength and regain my power, as well as support others who've had similar experiences. I managed to start speaking out, and that's been one of the biggest blessings for me, because not only does it allow me to speak up about the injustices that happen to me, but it also allows me to speak to issues that other victims don't feel like they can tackle yet.
Mbali, recently you started a movement, Let's Talk Backlog. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it weaves into your story and your organization?
My interest in the backlog issue stems from my own case and how it was handled. I had very little understanding about DNA, about the importance of it in a sexual violence case, and just about how the whole system was managed until I encountered judgment and secondary trauma at the hands of the police and the people who were handling my case. And in my case, unfortunately, the DNA collected wasn't sufficient. And so I wasn't able to really take it further. But I know that in so many cases, the samples are there, they exist, and they are strong enough. But the problem is that they're not being tested. Just going through the experience of having DNA collected and how that feels following a sexual trauma, and how invasive that was, how personal it was, and how traumatic it was, actually. I felt deeply about how many people have just been left and disregarded, and they have gone through two traumatic experiences and still there's no care or there's no interest. And so Let's Talk Backlog is an attempt to call the government to action and to say, hey, there's all of these cases that represent people and are indicative of lives that have been ruined or have been affected in some way. And so we have to have that same care for the individual and each individual. It's also a safe space for victims to come forward and to speak their truth. A lot of people don't realize the power of their voice and their story and how healing that is in the journey. And so I wanted to create a space where people knew that it was safe to speak up and to let their voice be heard as well.
They say that one survivor's story changes another. In many ways, this is what you are hoping to achieve through this, your bravery in speaking out against not only your own assault, but about the injustices that you suffered at the hands of the criminal justice system. How do you see this problem being resolved going forward? Talking about it is one thing. Do you have a specific call to action or view as to how this can be changed in a country like South Africa, where gender-based violence is so rife?
As a survivor, what I would want is to see more action, have more communication from the government, have a plan that we know that we can hold them accountable. Victims really need to have the agency over their own case and be informed of things that are happening if there are backlogs, if there are issues.
It seems such a simple solution to have access to your own information. Is there a way in which you've envisaged this becoming available to survivors such as yourself?
On our phones, there's apps, there's websites, there's all of these things that give us so much access to all this information. The rate at which we're getting information on our cases now is not good enough. You're asking for an update and nothing's been done, and you don't even know at what stage you are in the process, and you go forward and go backwards. If we had something that was a chronological logging of everything that's happening, maybe that would give us a lot of autonomy as a survivor. I think we all deserve to be informed.
We've seen it with COVID, the COVID dashboard. It's not always the numbers that we want to see, but the transparency that it provides gives us confidence that something is being done, or at least we are being given the opportunity to make those observations. We need to create a mechanism for accountability. And what you've suggested makes so much sense and seems so doable. Do you have any insight into what the backlog is currently in South Africa?
Last time I checked, it was sitting at over 160,000 cases. I can't imagine that many people are sitting in the dark. And I think that number just grows every day.
Well, actually, it's sitting between probably 280 and 300,000 currently. So it's almost double what you think it is. And that's just the backlog. That's not even the incoming cases. So it just gives you an idea of how big the problem is and how many people are probably being denied justice because of these delays. Can you tell us a little bit more about the delays that you've experienced and how that impacted you personally as a survivor?
From the time I reported it, I hadn't received any further communication. So had I not reached out again after reporting, I don't know what would have happened. For about a month or so, I wasn't interested in following up just because I needed to give myself the space to just come to terms with everything and deal with it. But after a month, we were quite inquisitive and we just wanted to know what was going on. And they just kept on sending us around. Constant run around was really demotivating. And it wasn't until a year later I found out that there were all of these problems that had not been communicated to me. Because when you ask for the information, it's not there, which is complicated and it's difficult.
What has triggered you to a large extent in starting your mindful organization is that there seem to be so many factors that have affected you, not only from the assault itself, but so many other things that came after that. Can you tell us about your organization and why it's so necessary, sadly necessary in South Africa?
I think that after my experience, what stood out to me was that I was really blessed in terms of having access to all of these resources. But I realized just how inaccessible and how expensive mental health support is in our country. And so the need for Mindful just came up in that we could offer mentorship, we could offer support. We have an amazing team of mentors who are all trained. And we are able to mentor you, walk the journey with you. But the aim is to eventually make mental health resources accessible for free.
In terms of speaking up, there's another aspect that strikes me as very important, and that is speaking up to the government as to how this directly affects survivors. How can you speak directly to the government on this issue as to how this can change?
Why is there no transparency? It's such a simple thing. It's basic respect. It's basic communication. So earlier this year, I was lucky enough to be invited to participate in the HITS conference. And during that conference, I got the opportunity of working with Ashley Spence, who is based in Texas. And she's another survivor who has worked tirelessly towards addressing the laws that exist in Texas around arrest, around DNA collection. And in our conversation, we just spoke to how there were so many similarities and so many differences within our specific context. As survivors, there's always a shared experience to some extent, but we were really interested to see how the backlog remains an issue, not only in South Africa, but in so many countries around the world. And it's something that as survivors, we all are confronted with. So Ashley and I wanted to say this is an issue that is bigger than me. It's bigger than South Africa. It's bigger than the US. It's something that we all have to fight and something that we all have a stake in and something that we could all contribute towards making a difference in. Let's Talk Backlog was sort of a call to action to everyone around the world. I think that we often try to put the responsibility of change on one group of people. But with Let's Talk Backlog, we are inviting anyone who has any ideas about how to address the backlog to share. And I think that then it becomes a collective effort. And now people from all different walks of life can come forward and put their contribution towards the backlog issue. And so we recognize that if we tackle it together, we think that we'd make a lot more progress.
Why, in your opinion, do you think that it's important in terms of sexual offences, specifically around gender-based violence?
DNA is the only way for us to know that you were where you were or you did what you did. It's the one piece of evidence that makes us aware of the identity of the individual, and that's so important in keeping people protected. South Africa, in a place where serial rapes are happening, where DNA is an opportunity to stop someone in their track.
Absolutely, and I think in conjunction with the DNA database, the identification of serial offenders and as well as the deterrent effect of a DNA database remain a very strong weapon in this fight against gender-based violence. We're looking for methodologies that work, and we have one, which is why your Let's Talk backlog becomes so important. We have a forensic infrastructure, we have DNA laws, but we have a backlog. And it's the missing piece in the puzzle in order to take it forward. What can you say about sensitivity training? What does this mean, and what does it look like going forward in terms of what you think it should look like?
There is no sense of care for the victim. I think that because we have this thing that happens so frequently in our country, police officials and people who you interact with immediately after an assault are often desensitized to what you are experiencing in the moment. Going into a police station and reporting in many cases is something that somebody doesn't want to do alone, or somebody is afraid to do. And so having somebody there that's going to receive you well, treat you with respect, and treat you in a way that makes you feel safe, I think is so important. The way I was treated by the police and the way that I felt in that space informed the way I chose to go forward with my case. And in a lot of the times I didn't feel supported. I felt, put in a corner. I felt unsafe a lot of the time. And that sensitivity, it was just not there. And so for others, I really hope that we can create a system either by going through the government and the way they're trained, or drawing light to civil society organizations who could maybe bridge the gap and be that support.
I think the collaboration between public and private partnerships is essential. I think sensitivity training should definitely be on the agenda. In August, the Women's Month in South Africa, it's a celebration of women, but yet I think there are a lot of struggles. As a woman in South Africa, we don't feel safe, and we have one of the highest incidences of rape in the world. First, what would you like to highlight in August in South Africa as part of a campaign against keeping our women safe?
Definitely becomes, for me, disheartening when Women's Month comes around and everyone is like, let's celebrate women and we love our women so much. I think for me, it's not genuine. And I think that there's a lot more that can be done to show that love and support that we have for women, than just, making pretty campaigns. And so for Women's Month, I would just love to see the combination of public and private, everyone stepping up.
Thank you for having the courage to stand up and speak the truth. For someone so young, I'm sorry that you've even had to have this conversation in the first place, but you've taken your experiences and you have really empowered so many people in South Africa. And I know that your journey has only just begun. As you say, you have to first of all take care of yourself, which I hope you're doing. And for those of you listening, please support Mbali's organization. Let's talk backlog. Hashtag. Let's have the conversation. Let's put pressure on government to remain accountable. It's very easy to put a dashboard in place. It's very easy to provide information to survivors as to what's happening with their case. And certainly there seems to be a huge amount of pressure on the government to show us that backlog, which now is close to 300,000 samples, is in fact being analyzed, and that those numbers are starting to drop. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everything that you've been doing. In your own words, your goodbye.
It's very easy to get discouraged by the things we see around us, by the statistics, by the way we are received. But I think that the importance of reporting a case is taking back your power. I think it's sort of removing the guilt from yourself, removing any shame, removing any responsibility from yourself. And it's saying that somebody else is responsible for this, and it's important that justice is done, or at least that I try to hold that person accountable. The whole aim of sexual violence and these things that people do to us, the aim is to minimize our voices and to make us feel as though we can't speak out. And so by actively reporting something and saying that this is wrong and this shouldn't have happened, step into your power and say that this was not okay.